Happy CX Day, everybody. This is Guneet Singh. Welcome to CX Day Countdown, the North America panel. So this is one of our many events which are taking place leading up to the CX Day, which is on 3rd of October. We are celebrating it worldwide. So it's an event for networking, ideas, learning, best practices. A full list of events is available on cxday.org. I would like to thank our sponsors for making it possible for the CX Day to hold this event across the globe. So you'll all have opportunity to ask the question, so please send Q&A through the window. We'll try and address as many as we can as we go over the panel. So now let me introduce our panel. We have a great privilege to have Mike Kendall, and we also have Mike Wittenstein, and then also we have Diane. So what I'll do is I'll give them the stage to introduce themselves to the audience. So we'll start with you, Diane. Diane, we'll start with you. If you can introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Sure. Hi, everyone. Diane Majors, current interim CEO for Customer Experience Professionals Association. I joined the association at the beginning because at that point in time, like most of you getting started, we were all kind of doing it out on our own and really needed a support system and community. So huge champion of CX Day and this event and the CXPA for what it brings to everybody in our profession.
Thank you, Dan. Over to you, Mike. Okay.
Hi, guys. Welcome, everybody. Really excited to share the next few minutes with you guys. Mike Kendall just recently ventured out of a long career in CX and design and innovation and process in the corporate world, and starting my own gig called the Customer Lab. So I'll be out and about, and Diane and I are partnering on some things as well. So looking forward to spending some time with you guys today.
Great to have you on panel. Over to you, Mike.
Hi, welcome everyone. You're in for a real treat today. This is not going to be your typical little webinar. We've got some very strong thinkers here. Mike Wittenstein is my name. I run a company called STORYMINERS, which was founded in 2002, right after I left IBM, where I started their first customer experience practice. Like Diane, one of the early entrants, STORYMINERS was a founding sponsor of CXPA, and our strengths are story, experience design, and strategy. One little note I'd like to make is that I do quite a bit of speaking around the world, and as I travel, I always look up people from CXPA, and now the group is so much broader. I'm glad I have some more friends to visit, so very cool.
Great. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. So we'll get started. So the topic for the panel this morning is experience to design, so especially as we live in the world of design, from having fantastic cars to smartphones to homes to maybe it's the food, startups in the food having focused on design so we consume. There is an increasing amount of interest towards understanding how experience is being shaped by design. So we'd like to start with our panelists here to understand, how do you define what is experience design? So we'll start with you, Mike. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that. Recently attended a UX event, and the lines seem to be blurring quite a bit, which I think is a good thing. My interpretation, I think design or user experience really should be end-to-end. A lot of times people refer to it in the digital realm, but if you really start with empathy, understanding deeply the emotions that your customers have, going out, observing them, not trying to think about it from a conference room, and then rapidly iterating prototypes, low fidelity to high fidelity, and then getting into deciding, is there something there or not? And that could be a product, that could be a part of an experience, a digital experience, or even a service experience, a call center type of workflow. So I think, fortunately, a lot of leading companies are starting to think of it more end-to-end as opposed to just all about designing an app or designing a software program.
Also, I'd like to second that notion. Any time a discipline uses the word design, they tend to specify their own kind of design. Graphic arts, architecture, even some areas of medicine. We only practice in our craft. But what Mike just mentioned is really true. Customer experience is one of the first umbrella paradigms, protocols, processes that does go end to end. So the way I like to define it is it's the art and science of turning what your customers want most into what your business does best. The design principles that experience design and customer experience rely on are tried and true. It's always about thinking about the entire ecosystem. It's always been about giving everyone a little bit more than they want. It's not the financial model of I win, you lose, or the competitive model of our team beat your team. It's make it better for everyone, because that's what makes an experience sustainable.
Yeah, I think something, just to tag on to that, when I was working with Humana and starting their Lean Innovation Lab, we called it a way of working because it was the art and science. It wasn't just a method or a procedure or a set of tools or techniques. It was really the entire culture. And so we were trying to design not only the processes and the experiences and the products, but what happened on the inside behind the scenes, and how did people react and work together across boundaries, bringing the legal team in, bringing HR in, and not just thinking about, I'm going to hand this off and then hope the next team does the thing that they need to do to delight the customer.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also agree. I think it's very intentional. So the one thing I think about design is a lot of companies will take insights and they'll go action and on something because they think it's the right thing to do. And design actually helps you step back and really understand what that need is that you're trying to fill, and design something intentionally around that need. So I think that's that little bit of that reverse psychology, rather than doing the knee-jerk. You really go back to, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the customer, person, product, retail store, what are we trying to accomplish, and how do we best design it to get there? And it belongs to everybody. That's the other thing that I hear a lot of is, oh, I don't have any designs because I'm not a designer. If you're changing something from one thing to something else, you're designing. And so it's really important to understand why you're doing it, how you do it, how you optimize it, how you're intentional about it.
So that's fantastic. As I'm hearing from all of you, is it's more about the way we do things. It's more about the culture, rather than just putting it in a box and saying it's a design for just one particular app or a product per se. So when we look about that, we look internally within the organizations who have been at the forefront of design and also innovation. From your perspective, when you hear about that, and also there's a term which originates pretty synonymously along with experience design called service design. So how will you view that, similarity or difference between experience design or the service design?
I'll go first on that one. Service design has been around a little bit longer than customer experience design, at least in terms of popularity. It's also got different patterns of adoption around the world. It's much more popular in Europe than it is in the United States, for example. Service design has a richer tool set when it comes to getting things done. A lot of the folks in service design came out of operations management. Think stopwatch, how fast are you doing things, how efficient is it? So think supply chain for service, and you've got at least the starting of an understanding of service design. Experience design is a little bit different. In my opinion, personal opinion, service design is all about creating the perfect service. It's all about meeting the needs of the business. That's usually where the charter for doing a service design project comes from. Let's make this process better. Let's get more customers enrolled, that kind of thing. And they do a lot of the same things that customer experience people do. They take out friction, they reduce frustration, and things like that. Experience design, because of the things that Diane and Mike mentioned, is a lot about creating value for the customer. When you're creating value for someone outside of the ecosystem or the business that you're in, it changes the way that you think, and it gives you the opportunity to see things in a different way. So experience design gets a little bit bigger and asks those deep, good why questions and why not questions, so that you can get at something that's of greater value for them. And that, in my opinion, is what the hard to measure thing in customer experience is, but it's where it's most valuable. When you customer experience-ize a company, it creates more value for customers, and that creates more value for everyone else.
Okay. I would add to that as well, just to say that I think if you're starting with the customer problem and getting at value and saying, how do I work back from that problem? I really understand what that gap is, and the customer may not even know that it's a real problem until you get out there and see it and say, oh, we have an idea or technology that we could change. The other thing I think is the macroeconomic challenge here is that if you're 35 or 40 years old or younger, you're probably not choosing based cost versus quality or product features. You're thinking more about the image of the company, and it's even beyond brand and marketing. It's more about, do they share the values and the belief system that I have? And it's hard to fake that. You think about a Warby Parker or a Tom's Shoes, or people subscribe to a belief set, and so that's way beyond service design and even experience design to human design, and saying, what's the human emotion? That may be the problem I'm solving. It's not so much the product. It's saying, hey, it's some shoes, but hey, I'm doing good through giving patronage to that company.
That's absolutely right. Mike and I just did a presentation on design to value, and that was part of what we talked about. Was if you're able to provide value back to the customer, saving them time, saving them effort, the feelings that they have and their behavior toward the brand is going to change, and that's what's driving the business results. But it's also endearing the brand to others and getting them to do things like advocate for you or come back or buy more. So it's often one of those things people say, oh, design is soft and fuzzy and there's not much to it, but it really can tweak an organization to really drive toward customer and business value.
I'd like to add one more thought. When for years and years, as new disciplines have come up, there have been questions that kind of polarize, like, is my discipline better than your discipline? It's like political parties. And I really want to emphasize that there are some amazing strengths in service design. It's a rich, well-documented, well-proven, got a lot of numbers to it methodology, and it's the go-to resource for customer experience professionals once they've got their idea and they need to get things done within the constraints of a company, particularly if it's regulated or ISO 9002 or something like that. The tool set is incredibly rich for tying into existing business systems, and you will find that you'll get so much more money as a consultant and so much more good results as a practitioner or an internal advocate if you learn a little bit about that tool set too.
Okay. So I will listen to, I think fantastic inputs from all of you. So will it be fair to kind of understand that they're not competing with each other, but they're more complementary to each other? So it's not service design is not a replacement of experience design or vice versa. It's more of a complementary.
Yeah,
Diane's ready to go.
Yeah, I think they actually have to thread together. So I'll give you a prime example, right? If I'm getting ready to go to Starbucks, which I just did, right? I went to my app and I ordered my drink. I walked into the retail store. I went up to the counter and got it. The gal behind the counter, said hello to me. She knows me. I'm a frequent flyer at Starbucks, and walked back out. That required design of not just the app, but how it interfaced with the retail experience and then interfaced with the service experience or the human-to-human experience. So that's why we always try to, gather our arms around everything going on in the organization, because if you're just designing in your silos, then you're not caring for that journey. So designing around the journey, as Mike said earlier, is really critical. Because if those things disconnect, you're going to get that kind of grinding gear feeling when you walk in and your drink's not ready, or the culture of the organization isn't represented like the app is. So it's really important to make sure when you're designing, you're thinking about all those touch points, and each one is designed to be optimized for the customer.
I would add to that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I'd like to remind our viewers and audience that please let us know any questions which you have throughout. I know some popping up, so use the panel box on the right on the panel and share with us the questions or thoughts you have. Please go ahead, Mike. Okay.
I was just going to tag on to that. I think when I think about human-centered design, to me it's really the intersection of the design experience that we normally think of, getting customer insights, emotion, and building our solutions to that. But then there's also the second piece to that, which is execution or delivery. What good is a great design if the customer doesn't actually experience the value you intended for them? And then the third piece to that, which some companies miss, is the culture part of it, which is, did I select the right talent? Did I develop them, give them the tools, reinforce the great behaviors, free them up to do the right thing when nobody else is around? And so where those three come together, that's where you see those magical experiences at a Disney or a Ritz-Carlton or one of these places that we all talk about. And my experience in a few different industries is that the companies tend to be really good at one of those three things. Some of them are good at two, but it's the rare exception that get good at all three, and that's really the secret sauce.
And staying on that point, Mike, Kendall, in terms of how the experience design is playing a very crucial and a vital role, especially in the current economy. 12 years ago, or I'll say 13 years ago, experience economy was the new type of economy which was developed. So how do you view that the experience design is playing a very crucial and a pivotal role in the experience economy? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
That was for Mike K, right?
Yes.
Or for me? Okay.
No, you can start as well. So I was just anchoring upon Mike's point around how Ritz-Carlton has been using the experience design. So
yeah,
go ahead.
There's so many people that are touched by customer experience. The customers, the businesses, the suppliers in the ecosystem, the media, technology companies, everybody. It takes thousands and thousands of players. Lots of different checks get written for Disney to deliver one of its experiences, or for an airline to do that. At the core of it all is customer choice. We live in a period of time where customers have more empowerment than they ever have before, a greater ability to act, instant access to information, the feeling of a lot more power. And because some brands have been very responsive to them, they become more and more demanding. So instead of the buck stops in one place or another, I think the buck starts with customers who have certain desires. And the desires that they have aren't just for things or for services. It's not just the left brain analytical countable side. They're looking for things that they're naturally attracted to. They're looking for emotional values in addition to the other things. Like when you hire or buy a spouse, when you get married or elect to be with someone, trying to use the right language for all the different parts of the world, you want somebody that you're going to love, not just someone who's going to be a great mom or a good cook. It's a complete package. So that's the feeling part. But the other thing that's really different about an experience than a service or a product is you're paying money because you personally want to be transformed. And when you're transformed, there's something there that's very different, and people are willing to pay for that now. There's just a shift going on from I want to have a lot of things to I want to have good experiences and memories and things that I can remember forever. So it starts with the customer's new desires.
Great. So we have a question also popping up. How did you measure the success of experience design? I think it falls in terms of what we're chatting about, but I think it's good to hear from you as well.
Yeah, to me, I think it starts with understanding what the problem is that the design is intended to solve, and really knowing that well, and then having what I'd call benefit metrics to that, and it's usually one or two. So customers may say, "Hey, I want a cheap piece of software." Really, the benefit is I need something that's going to save me time, or it's going to make my life easier, or whatever those may be. So once you know that, then you can start to build a set of metrics that go along with that, and then all the cascading execution metrics to see things that are failing and prevent that. So I think it's starting kind of the old Covey begin with the end in mind, of knowing what that thing is that you're really building for and solving for, and then making sure you're not just saying, hey, we sold more, that's an outcome metric, but we actually help that customer save time or build confidence or whatever the real solution was that you're trying to deliver the real benefit.
Okay. All right. So moving on, so one key question here, which I always...
You got something too? It looked like you were about to weigh in.
Well, I was going to say it was a little bit around what you were saying, and just very basic things. When people think about design, they often think about like product design or UX interface design. And one company that I worked with earlier on, they had launched a product, an app, and a product related to it, and their adoption rates weren't very good. And so we went back out and did more studies, and they hadn't applied much design to their approach. And we did more studies and really listened to them and talked with the customers about what they were experiencing and what was standing in their way, and the barriers and all the things Mike talked about. When we went back and redesigned it, we were able to show that adoption rates and time on the app and all those measures that the team was wanting were there, but we also correlated that to the the customer saying it was better, they stayed on longer, they were able to achieve what they wanted easier. So I think it's really important to correlate when you're talking about design what the customer gets out of it, but still tell the story internally about the business benefit, because it really, I mean, you know, like a better term, every executive is saying, you know, revenue and cost. Well, we can talk about, you know, being human-centered. That's what they're caring about. And so we wanted to really build the story behind, if we can connect customer experience, that they're seeing, even subconsciously, they were seeing things change, that tied to revenue. That was a good benefit for them. And so that product team, I almost got to the point where they wouldn't start anything until they started with that. We got to go out and really understand what people are trying to do and what their needs are before they started launching a product or even an update. So that we consider that a win.
Yeah, and I think you think about rapid experimentation with customers, and you can really use that technique across any change you make in the experience. You know, in some of the teams I've worked with in the past, you say, well, we'll just go ask them, we'll show them a prototype and say, hey, would you buy this? And if 80% said yes, then we're going to go build it, versus, well, they're going to say something to please you, could we maybe test it a little more rigorously by putting a website up or getting an email address and asking for a credit card, or doing something, or if it's internal adoption of let's build a simple prototype and see how many times the call center reps actually use this versus another tool. And so you may have to experiment your way to the right metrics, but you start with a hypothesis, leap of faith assumption, and then a behavior that you want to see changed, and try to observe or measure that behavior change before you get too big and deep into execution.
Okay, great. So being a CX professional and celebrating CX Day, a question, which is I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on is how CX professionals should think about incorporating experience design in their day-to-day practice.
Mike, you want to?
Well, yeah, but also, you've been put in the role of being moderator, and I give you permission, if you have opinions, that you can share those too, okay? Anytime.
Please go ahead.
I'll go ahead on this one.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
All right. So experience design and customer experience often get interchanged. They're like the same words. In this conversation, let's give them two different definitions. Customer experience is, however you want to define it, it's the big enchilada. It's the big umbrella. It's the Bruce Temkin definition. It's the Diane Majors. It's the Mike Kendall or the Mike Wittenstein definition. It's big thing. Customer experience design, real big emphasis on the design. So for folks that are new in the business, please consider that once you've got your data and your desire and it's time to go to delivery, you need to figure out what's that experience going to be. I can't tell you how many proposals I've seen, or requests for proposals, or reports, or findings from other consultants that I've found that jump from blah, 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 research to now we're measuring our results. Well, who's figuring out what that interaction is going to be like? How is it going to feel? Is grandma going to like it? Is it suitable for children? What's the tone, the voice, the smell? What are the 5 senses that are involved? There's a lot of work that goes on in design, and if you are not feeling very creative yourself, all you need to do is go talk to somebody that you consider to be creative, a writer, a painter, a singer. Anybody that's got that creative vibe going will see the world differently, and you can learn from them how to appreciate some of the small details that make a really big difference. It's where the stiction comes from. It's why at Build-A-Bear Workshop, for example, they have these little rituals, like you put a heart inside the bear and you make a wish. Well, that makes it unforgettable for you. And everybody does a different wish, and they're thinking about themselves. So of course their hearts go pitter-patter, and they've got 50 of those things. Disney has hundreds of ways to stay in its story. So design, for me, is all about after the data and after you've got your outcomes mapped and your, I call it desire because it's part human, part business. How do you translate that into a design that others will notice, remember, and share?
That's good stuff. I love that. And I think about even in the B2B world, when I was at Intuit and we're talking to CPAs about enterprise software, they still cared about the icon that was next to their name in the online community. Did it say newbie or new to the software? And if you're actually sitting in a room with them and show them that, you can see the anger starting to rise. I'm a 15-year CPA, and you're going to call me a newbie in front of all my peers. And our design teams start to like, oh my gosh, would never have caught that through a survey or a research study. So you have to, if you're not comfortable getting out in front of customers, you're more of the traditional, I'm going to go do the quant surveys and look at that. That's good to have, but you've probably got some people, if you're at a big company, that are folks that get out and talk to customers. Go do ride-alongs, spend a week or two with them, live in their shoes. If you don't have that resource, CXPA has some things, Stanford has some things, there's some other sources you can go to sharpen those tools. But I think at the end of the day, it's the marriage of that emotional and the observational with the quantitative. And the thing we used to always get back to it is, and our senior leaders would ask the question, how do you know that customers are going to love that? What's your validated learning? And if you just came with the 52-page report, and they'd say, well, what was the emotion? And it's not just one verbatim. It's, hey, I spent a week in a CPA's office, and by day 3 or 4, they're screaming at me because the printer's exploding and all their ink cartridges are gone because of our software. They never would have told me that being polite if I just spent an hour with them. So there's a lot of techniques and tools out there, but it may be out of your comfort zone, but I'd challenge you to go jump in and get comfortable with it, because you'll be an awesome CX person then when you can speak the language of marketing, the language of design, and the language of finance, and then pull it all together.
Diane, you and I have talked about that before. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I cheat a little bit, I guess, because I came into this. I started out as a clinical psychologist, and so it's actually one of the best things coming into customer experience and how I found my way here, because it is anthropology and sociology and psychology and really understanding those pieces and parts. Because if you think about Maslow's hierarchy, everybody's pretty familiar with that. Lots of companies can meet functional needs today, but the higher up you get in the Maslow's hierarchy of meeting emotional needs and self-actualization and some of those things we talk about, we as customers get connected to brands that make us feel that way. And that's really what you're after. So you really have to dig in and understand, as Mike said, what that person's trying to accomplish, what they want, and the emotions that you're creating in it. And that's why we see emotions come up all the time now, which is, back to the first part of our conversation, very hard for organizations to say, I got to talk about psychology, like I got revenue numbers to meet this quarter, right? So it's this really tough balance we have to ride of how do we educate the organization around the importance of that. And the best thing I've found is to really make it personal for folks, right? Think about if you were going to have that experience, or if it was your 16-year-old daughter having the experience, what would that be like? How would it make them feel? And so we really want to bring that into it. Into part of it. So it's definitely part of the skill set of a CX professional that I think is surprising sometimes, that they have to kind of develop that muscle. And that's part of what design is all about too.
Well, like you said, it's developing a muscle, and you really can do that. And it's some of the most enjoyable work that many of you will have when you discover that, that Diane psychology side of things. It's thrilling to learn those skills.
Yes.
One thing too to add to that, I think the question's really challenged for a lot of companies, because a lot of times this type of work sits in a laboratory. Or we've built this really cool workspace, and even here in the Dallas area where we're seeing all these mega corporate complexes, their labs are in a secret location or a cool hip part of town. But you've got to think about your company end to end and say, hey, I need call center folks that think this way and they're out talking to customers. I need the lawyers out of their boardroom and out talking to customers and figuring out ways to make it easier for designers to get that empathy. So I would challenge you not only to sharpen your own saw and get good at this, but to encourage your organization to look at examples like Humana or Intuit or GE or other big companies that are starting to think about how do we scale innovation everywhere and expect everybody to be an entrepreneur. Otherwise, the startups will eat us. There's so much venture capital out there coming into traditional industries now that if you don't come up with the next big thing, you're either going to have to go spend a lot of money to acquire it, or you're just going to get eroded away. And so I really think what we're talking about here is bigger than just CX. It's really got to be the DNA of the organization.
That's great.
Yeah, to that point, one of the funnest things that I did with one brand is we actually taught design thinking. Like, we taught mini courses and lunch and learns and customers and coffee. We used any opportunity to get design techniques in front of folks. Really simple exercises that just kind of taught it. And it had nothing to do with the brand. It was just getting people to be aware that there is a whole different language out there, a whole different way of thinking, and tools and techniques that weren't like this crazy thing in the lab. Like, design is this big open thing that you can't understand, and it's nobody can do it. It's very simple sometimes. It's just learning the approach and learning the technique. So that was a really fun way to get the organization to come along.
Yeah.
Right.
Guneet, I want to point out how abnormal this conversation is. This is just bizarre, because in most of the news, everyone's fighting and we're all agreeing. It's just so strange.
No, I think this is the most cordial one which I've seen, so which is great. So just one last question which is coming up from the audience as well is, in addition to getting the tools and experience with the design thinking, different tools under the experience design, what skills do you value as the key skills professionals should think about as they're grooming their career or honing their skills? So what are the key skills you value? We'll start with Mike W. with you.
Sure, Guneet. Well, I've been doing a lot more coaching of folks that are new in their CX roles, like first year or first 100 days type of a thing, and they think this is so odd when we start, but they love it when we're done. We go shopping. We go to a mall, and I walk them through, from an expert's perspective, all the things that I see that are going right, that are going wrong, or that could be better, and then I start shifting the conversation over to them and pointing out that they can do it too, but also pointing out that there's bias in their thinking sometimes. Also getting them to reverse engineer, like Diane talked about before. Oh, they gave you your receipt. Well, how did that happen? Well, they needed to know who you were, when did, and so on and so on. Another thing that you can do is take your video camera or your phone with you and start capturing things that catch your attention, whether it's 2 minutes at a drive-through, or how you're greeted at a hospital, in a maternity ward, or whether you see somebody else being treated well, or the cook comes out from the restaurant. Start your own little video library, because that'll help you as you share your ideas with other people. It will build you a very personal library, and it also works on social. The last thing is to start, I guess, for some people it would be a diary, but just pay attention to this one thing and it will make you a better designer. As you're out and about in the world, as you're being treated and served by other people, as you read advertising, as you look at receipts and see how they're different than what you ordered, note how you feel emotionally. And don't say good or bad or taken advantage of. Those are all generic or logical things. I feel frustrated. I feel elated. I feel refreshed. I feel weighted down. Try to get your vocabulary of emotions to a higher plane, because that's what designers use when they're trying to figure out how to do things right. And if you're able to articulate those emotions, if you can paint pictures with your words of how things should feel, you'll start to get off of, it's too much, it's not enough, all the normal corporate bickering, and you'll get people starting to talk about the things they value most, and that's when the conversations can make great progress with everybody supporting each other. So quick summary, shop more, take some videos, and be able to articulate how you feel. And those are all fun things to do with a friend, by the way.
Yeah, I love that, Mike. That's what I always call ruining. I say if you come as a customer experience professional, you're kind of going to be ruined, right? You're never going to see things the same way. But I like the other piece. I'd add on to that I encourage people also to listen to that voice in their head. Now, I know you all have it, so I'm not crazy, right? It's the things that you say subconsciously that kind of register that we never verbalize. They just kind of run through our brain, but they stick back there. And so being able to, like when you're walking in and shopping, to talk out loud and really bring to bear the things that you're saying, because that's also a good way to identify what could I improve. Right? What could I? Oh, that was like they didn't acknowledge that I was there, or that was confusing, or I wish they would have done this. Those are opportunities to gather how to design, because you want the reverse of whatever gear grinded when you had that experience, or if it was a positive one too. What were the things that said, man, he really went out of his way? Oh, discretionary effort. That really shows something different. So I'd add on to that, Mike. There's one more on that list.
You know, Diane, I'm thinking maybe we need a support group for CX professionals, because I think about how, you know, we go out to a restaurant and, you know, something either is awesome or it's awful. And my wife looks at me and is like, you're not going to say something, all right? Or you're not going to, like, tell me all the things in the background that they should have done differently. But I think about, you know, what to me maybe the overarching principle is, as advice, is to just strive for awesome, you know, and it's so easy, especially at a big company, to say, hey, we are the best of our industry, or the best of whatever, you know, we're the biggest, we're growing, and not think about the money that's coming in through the side door, or the workarounds that, you know, in the banking industry, where like people are funding themselves. Why do I need to go to a bank for a loan for college when I could go get a GoFundMe or whatever? So don't just get satisfied with where you're at. Think about what awesome looks like, and just like Mike said, look for it and say, why can't we do that? Why can't we blow that away? Don't learn from the CEO at Capital One always said, we're not trying to beat our competitors like Wells or Citi, we're trying to beat Google and Amazon, or be like them, because that's who we're being compared to, really. That's where our consumers are. And I'll leave you with an example on this topic from Ritz-Carlton a few years back. I was speaking at a conference at Half Moon Bay, and they literally used my name without me ever giving it to them 5 times before I got to my room when I checked in. And so, you know, the CX brain is going off saying, how are they doing this? You know, they checked me in at the gate, and then the guy opened my door, Mr. Kendall, welcome, you know. He handed me to another guy who walked me in and to the front desk. Hello, Mr. Kendall. All of them who weren't talking to each other. And finally, I got to meet the general manager, and I said, how did you do that? Because it blew my mind, and I thought it was awesome. He said, we actually did a lot of research on how many times before somebody was really loyal and coming back. So there was a lot of analytics behind it. And then they invested a ton of money in radios and little wires. So everybody on property, they say, Mr. Kendall is checking in, I'm bringing him now, and then they would just hand you off. But you know, my car dealer has RFID chips in the cars now, and your name shows up where you don't see it. And they open the door and say, hello, Mr. Kendall, and that wasn't cheap for them. But those things where you can say, hey, this is going to be a difference maker, the heart and the bear, and prove it with data. Your mind will start thinking that way, and you will either go crazy because it doesn't happen fast enough, or you'll become an awesome change leader, which is another key skill for a CX person to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Guneet, you're a lead practitioner as well. Would you like to add anything? I know I'm kind of nudging you out of your role a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I couldn't agree more with you know, the thoughts which you guys have shared, and I totally agree on that. I think for me personally, I'll give one example. So I bought a personal laptop a couple of years ago. I was trying to justify buying that laptop to my wife when she was arguing with me, hey, these 2 laptops seem exactly the same. They have the same configuration. Why you decided to buy one? So without taking name of that particular laptop, you know, it was more about the experience. It was more about, I'll say, it's unintentional loyalty, you know, attitudinal loyalty which I have towards that brand, because I get so much emotionally attached to it. So I totally kind of, you know, as I was listening to the thoughts from you guys, I can totally relate to it. It's just sheer more than just the brand itself. It's the emotion which gets tied on to the brand. So, but great. So with that, we'll come to the end of our fantastic panel. Thank you, all of you, for joining and sharing your opinions. I appreciate that. For our audience, thank you for joining us. We will continue the celebrations on CXday.org. We will post a recording of this webinar on the CXday.org pretty shortly. So please feel free to go and leverage that. We also are using Twitter handles, so please go and Twitter and see the way the inputs being given by various experts around the world. So with that, we'll bring this panel to an end. Thank you so much. Happy CX Day.
Thank you, Guneet.